finding rational numbers between other rational numbers using the average method. How do we find out average of two numbers? Well, we know there is a formula, and the formula goes like this. The average of two numbers is equal to the sum of the two numbers divided by the number 2. So let's take some examples. Say we want to find out the average of the number 0 and number 10. So the formula says we will first find out the sum of the two numbers, and then we will divide the sum by the number 2. So in this case it will be 0 plus 10 is 10, divide by 2 or 5. So we say that the average of 0 and 10 is 5. Similarly, if you were to calculate the average of the number 10 and 20, how do we do that? So we are going to add 10 and 20 and we will divide the sum by 2. So 10 plus 20 will be 30 divided by 2, or it will be 15. So let's take maybe a few more examples. How about we find out the average of the number 20 and 100? So we are going to add the two numbers and we are going to divide them by 2. So this will be 20 plus 100 is 120 divided by 2, or 60. So now this is true for any two numbers. Say for example, if my two numbers are 1 and maybe say, why don't we take 2 over 5? So how do I find out the average of these two numbers? Well, the average of these two numbers will be, again, we are going to add the two numbers and we are going to divide the sum by the number 2. So we are going to solve this and we will find out what the average is. So in this case the average will be, so this will be 5 plus 2, 7 over 5, and then we will have here 2 or 2 over 1, or this will be 7 times 1 over 5 times 2, or it will be simply 7 over 10. So now that we know how to find out the average of two numbers, let's take a look at how we can write it officially. So if the first number is A, the second number is B, then the average of the two numbers A and B is given by A plus B divided by the number 2. So I just want to highlight one point here. Throughout this video we are talking about taking an average of two numbers. So generally, if we were to find out average of say n numbers, n could be any of them, n could be 1, n could be not 1, well you cannot take an average of one number, n could be 2, n could be 3, n could be 5, n could be any number, right? So if you were given 5 numbers, then you were to ask what is the average of the 5 numbers. So in that case the average of the 5 numbers will be, you're going to find out the sum of 5 numbers and then you will divide that by 5, right? So but in this video we are focusing on finding out average of two numbers. So now that we understand what is average, how to calculate average, let's try and understand if we can find out what does average really mean. What is the meaning of average? So to explain this, let's draw ourselves a line. So we have drawn ourselves a line. Now let's take any 2 points on this line. So maybe let's take a point here, let's call this x1, and let's take a point here, let's call this point x2. What we are going to do is we are going to find out the average of x1 and x2. We just now saw the average will be x1 plus x2, the sum of them, and we divide this by 2. Let's call this x3. So what really it means is this point x3 is right in the middle of x1 and x2. So this will be x3. That means x3 is the midpoint of x1 and x2. So average is nothing. Average of two numbers is simply the midpoint of the two numbers. So now how will the average method help us find out rational numbers between any two given numbers? So the way it will help us, the average method will help us is, say in the beginning we are given these two rational numbers, and we have been asked to find out, let's say, 4 rational numbers in between x1 and x2. So the way we are going to use the average method is as follows. We will find out the average of x1 and x2. That will give us the point x3, right, using this formula. Then we can find out the average of x1 and x3, which will give us the midpoint between x1 and x3. Let's call it x4. So what will be the value of x4? Well, we know that x4 will be simply, because x4 is the average of these two numbers, so it will be x1 plus x3 divided by 2. So this will be x4. Similarly, we can find out the average of x3 and x2, and that will be the midpoint between these two. Let's call it x5, right? And x5, we can find that out by using the formula again, average of x3 and x2. So it will be x3 plus x2 divided by 2. So now remember, we are trying to find out 4 rational numbers. So we have already found out 3 rational numbers between x1 and x2. So now you can find out another average between x1 and x4, and you will get this number. Or you can find out the average of x4 and x3, and you will get this number. Or you're going to find out average of x3 and x5, and you can get this number. Or you can find out the average of these two, and you can find this number. So I hope, friends, you're able to understand how we can use this average method to find out as many rational numbers as we want between x1 and x2. And x1 and x2 are the original pair of rational numbers which were given to us.